So we are going to be making this card. It lends itself perfectly to a sympathy card or thinking of you. I've got words are never enough here, and on the inside I've got thinking of you. You could leave this blank so that the sender of the card fills it out themselves. So we are going to take a piece of watercolor paper, and you can see I've got something on this side. This was the first shot of this video that did not quite work out as planned. So I'm going to stick to the way that I did the card initially. I'm going to take a piece of painter's tape and mark off where I want my strip to be. Pressing very hard at the edges, preferably straight. I don't want any ink getting under here, as was the case on my previous take. And if you wanted, you could measure this and use a T-square or something to make sure that it's perfectly straight, but I'm comfortable just eyeballing it. So make sure you've got some overlap here and that your edge is covered. I'm going to put one more just to be on the safe side. And while we're talking safe, let's put one more. Once bitten, twice shy. Okay, so that's it for the painter's tape. We are going to use a brayer, and we are going to use the following colors: Mango Melody, Grapefruit Grove, Flirty Flamingo, and Poppy Parade. We're going to start with the lightest color. Now I have washed this, so it is a little damp, so this might spread a little bit differently than if you were using a dry brayer. But art is, part of the fun is in the experimenting, right? I will say it goes on much easier when it's damp. But I also want to keep it from going under that tape. Next is Grapefruit Grove. And Flirty Flamingo. I just find that by going in this little X pattern that I don't get any obvious lines. But if you have a brayer technique that works for you, then stick with that. Just going to go over all of this. And then last is Poppy Parade. And that's that. It's that simple. So the one thing we are going to do before we take this tape off is take a spritzer and instead of spraying it, you're just going to drop some water drops on it. And then if you want some finer mist, instead of spritzing right on the paper, just kind of go like that and you'll get some much smaller drops. And one final spritz over the whole thing. Take your paper towel, wipe that all off, and there we go. So, one tool I recommend to remove your tape is the paper piercing tool. Just to lift it off of your grid paper and then pull it back instead of up. And you are much less likely to get tearing in your watercolor paper. Less likely, not impossible. Now with this, we've got at least 2 layers that don't touch the paper. One thing I would recommend is wiping away this excess ink so that you don't get it all over your fingers and then all over your card. And just keep it handy. Grab a block that fits your tree, and using Versamark, and I am using copper embossing powder. I'm actually casing myself on this card. I did one that was in more neutral colors and posted it on Pinterest, and it was very popular. So I've changed up the colors a little bit, but still the same design. So part of the reason that I wanted to heat set this was so that my embossing powder wouldn't also stick to that. I only want it to stick to my tree. Try and blow off or wipe off any stray powder. If you have the embossing buddy, be sure to use that before you use your Versamark. Always easier to wipe this off before you heat set it than to try and get it off after it has been set. So in the second part of this stamp set are the sentiments, and we are going to use Words Are Never Enough. I am just going to grab a G block for that. Oops. Try and have it straight. And using early espresso, you could heat emboss this part as well, but I always like to stamp off before I stamp on my card. Make sure I've gotten a good impression that all the stamp is on the block, etc. So that is all the stamping. Actually, while we have this out, we are also going to do our envelope. I am trying to get in the habit of doing a custom envelope every time that I make a card. I realized in preparing for a craft sale that it is much easier to do it one-off instead of having to do a ton of them at one time. So let's do that, shall we? And instead of early espresso, we will use soft suede. You could certainly use any of the colors that are in your card, or really any color for that matter. I like to do a couple on the back. And I always like to do one that goes front and back. And then a couple in each of the corners. And there. It really finishes it off nicely. Oh, not quite yet, too soon. The other thing is we are using early espresso cardstock. So we want to do an insert because no one's going to be able to write on a piece of early espresso and have it seen. So let's just do a couple of leaves down here as well. I just rotated them a little bit so that it's not the same every time. There we go. One tiny more there. And with this one, I'm going to leave it blank. I'm not going to put the thinking of you inside. And then just using a bit of snail. We are going to adhere that on the inside. And then cutting a piece of burlap ribbon. As well as a piece of the copper trim. This, we will use some glue dots to put down. I've lost my glue dots. I know they're around here somewhere. Do you ever, there they are. Do you ever find when you're crafting, you know something is there, you're probably looking right at it, but it's not registering? This time it was hiding behind a card, so I have an excuse. Try and line that up so that it kind of underlines those words without impeding the view of it. You could wrap this around, but I find cutting it off is better. And then with your copper trim, you are going to tie the tiniest of bows. And if you don't feel comfortable cutting it and then tying the bow, then tie it before you cut it from the spool. I might have cut this one a little too small. Just keep pulling from the end so that you have enough to work with, so that it doesn't go all the way through. And then just adjust until you're happy with how it looks. I just want a tiny bow, so I'm going to cut there. I'm using another glue dot. We will attach that, but not yet. Using the leaves trinkets from that beautiful suite, we are going to attach one of the copper ones, and I like to get part of a glue dot there, well, a full glue dot there, and then one here, just so that it doesn't move around and fall off. and then attach that where you see fit. Put another glue dot on here. Just trying to hide that little stem there. And voila. Now on the card that I have on Pinterest, I also have some copper metallic thread, but I feel like this is enough. Using our Tombow adhesive, we're going to cover up this side, aka take one. It would have made a great underwater scene though, especially for the Sea of Texture suite. So attach this to your early espresso card base and press it down. You could see the watercolor paper was a little warped right in the middle. Just hold it down for a moment. And there we go. And I just got the tiniest bit of glue coming out of there. Easier to get it while it's wet. But if you don't see it until after, just use an adhesive eraser and it will take it off just like that. So, 2 beautiful cards that you could use for any occasion really. Words are never enough to thank you. Words are never enough in sympathy. So use it how you will. And there we go. So I thank you for joining me. I hope that if you haven't already hit that big subscribe button below, that you will consider doing it now. Thank you for joining me, friends. Bye.